The afternoon I saw her again, it felt like time itself froze in place, as if the world had quietly stopped moving just so I could feel every weight I had spent years trying to escape. She was standing under a fading canopy of sunlight outside an old bookstore I used to pass by when I was younger, and the moment her eyes found mine, something inside me cracked open in a way I thought had healed long ago. I did not expect her to be there, and I definitely did not expect the first thing she would do was study me like she was searching for the boy I used to be, the boy who always disappeared before anything real could begin. It was in that silent recognition that she asked the question that shook me more than anything I had ever heard in my life, not through words spoken loudly, but through the way her expression softened with pain and familiarity, as if she already knew the answer before I could even face it. She was asking if I was running again, if I had come back only to leave once more, if I was still the same person who kept vanishing whenever life demanded permanence. And for the first time, I did not look away. For the first time, I did not run. Before we move deeper into this emotional journey, if you believe in kindness, healing, and second chances, take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel Echo Tellies. Your support means more than you know and helps bring more heartfelt stories like this to life. My name was Zavian, and I used to believe that leaving was the same as surviving. Every place I ever cared about eventually became a place I escaped from. It started when I was young, when emotional weight felt heavier than I could carry, and I learned too early that staying meant facing things I did not understand. So I developed a habit of disappearing, not physically at first, but emotionally. I would pull myself out of conversations, out of friendships, out of anything that required me to be fully present. Over time, leaving became easier than staying, and fear disguised itself as independence. Then Meherin entered my life during a season when I thought I had already mastered the art of detachment. She was not loud in her presence, but she had a way of noticing things others ignored. She noticed when I went quiet, when I drifted away in my thoughts, when I smiled without actually feeling it. She never forced me to explain myself, yet her silence always felt like an invitation to be honest. Being with her was different, not because she fixed me, but because she made me feel like I did not have to constantly hide that we were young when everything between us began, and the world around us still felt like something we had time to figure out later. Those days were filled with long walks that never needed destinations, afternoons where time felt slower, and evenings where even silence felt comfortable. But even in those moments, there was a part of me that never fully settled. I loved her in the way someone holds on to warmth while secretly preparing for cold weather. I was never fully present, always half expecting something to end. Eventually, life did what it always does when fear is left unchallenged. A misunderstanding grew between us, not dramatic at first, but small cracks that widened because I never stayed long enough to repair them. I began withdrawing again, convincing myself that distance was protection. One day, I simply left the city without properly saying why, telling myself I needed space when the truth was I was afraid of being seen too clearly. That was the first time I truly broke something between us. Years passed after that. I moved through different places, different routines, different versions of myself that never quite felt real. I learned how to function without attachment, how to keep conversations shallow, how to avoid anything that resembled emotional responsibility. On the surface, I looked fine. Inside, I was always moving, even when I was standing still. I thought I had escaped the consequences of my past, but what I had really done was delay them, and then, on that ordinary afternoon, everything caught up to me. Seeing Meherin again was not like meeting someone new. It was like opening a book I had left unfinished and realizing the pages still remembered me. She had changed in ways that made her seem both familiar and distant. There was strength in her posture now, a quiet resilience that had not been there before. Life had shaped her into someone who no longer waited for things that refused to come, yet in her eyes, there was still something soft, something that remembered who I used to be before I learned how to run. The silence between us was heavy, not uncomfortable, but filled with years of unanswered questions. I could feel her looking at me not just as the man I had become, but as the boy who once promised presents he never fully gave. And in that moment, I understood what she was really asking without her needing to say anything. She was asking whether I had changed or whether I had only returned because I had nowhere else left to go. Something inside me shifted. For so long, I had built my identity around avoidance. I thought running meant I was free, but standing there in front of her, I realized I had never actually been free at all. I had only been escaping the same fear in different places. Fear of being known. Fear of being needed. Fear of staying long enough to disappoint someone who mattered. The truth rose slowly inside me, not dramatic or sudden, but steady and undeniable. I was tired. Not of life, but of leaving it halfway lived. I was tired of being a memory in other people's stories instead of a presence in my own. And more than anything, I was tired of looking at the one person who had once mattered most to me and feeling like I had no right to exist in her present. Meherin did not move closer, but she also did not walk away. She simply waited, as if she had already lived through enough disappointment to know that forcing answers never creates truth. That stillness gave me something I had never really experienced before. Space to choose differently. For the first time, I allowed myself to stay in the moment without planning an escape route. I let the past exist without trying to outrun it. I let the guilt sit without defending myself against it. And in that quiet acceptance, I finally understood that honesty was not about fixing what was broken, but about finally admitting how it broke. As the sunlight shifted around us, I made a decision that did not feel heroic, only necessary. I did not want to be someone who appeared and disappeared anymore. I did not want to be remembered as a pause in someone's life story. I wanted to be real, even if it meant facing everything I had avoided for years. Meherin's presence did not demand anything from me, yet it gave me the courage to stop hiding from myself. I realized that the hardest person to forgive was never her, but myself. And maybe forgiveness would not come instantly, but staying was the first step I had ever truly taken toward earning it. If this story is touching your heart, take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who believes in second chances, and subscribe to Echo Tellies for more emotional stories that remind us what it means to heal, to feel, and to begin again. The day slowly softened into late afternoon, and instead of walking away like I used to, I remained where I was. Not because everything was solved, but because for once, I refused to turn pain into distance. I stood there with her, not as the boy who ran, but as someone trying, finally, to learn how not to. Before this story ends, there is something important I want to say, something I wish I had understood much earlier in life. Sometimes coming back is not about returning to someone else, but about returning to yourself. Now, just before we reach the end of this journey, I have a special request for you. Please comment below and share what you felt during this story, because your words matter more than you know. And as the last light of the day stretched across the street, I finally understood that the opposite of running was not staying in one place, but staying with the truth. For the first time in years, I was not disappearing. I was here. And that, for me, was the beginning of everything I had once been too afraid to live. There was a long pause after that day, not the kind of silence that breaks things, but the kind that slowly rebuilds them in ways you cannot immediately see. I did not chase Meherin. I did not try to force a second chance or demand forgiveness like it was something owed to me. I simply stayed present in the same city, in the same reality I had once abandoned, and for the first time in years, I allowed myself to feel the uncomfortable weight of being consistent. Days turned into weeks, and instead of running away from thoughts of her, I began sitting with them. I started noticing the small things I had ignored for so long, like how guilt does not disappear when you distract yourself, it only waits patiently until you finally slow down. I realized that what I had called independence was actually avoidance, and what I had called strength was just fear wearing a different face. That I began working at a small repair shop near the edge of the old market, not because it was my dream, but because it gave me structure. Something about fixing broken things felt strangely connected to what I was trying to do with myself. Machines did not judge me. They did not ask why I left or why I came back. They simply needed patience, attention, and consistency, things I was still learning how to give. But even in that quiet routine, Meherin never fully left my thoughts. Not in a painful way anymore, but in a reflective one. I would sometimes remember how she used to look at me, not with anger, but with that quiet sadness of someone who cared more than they were allowed to show. I began to understand that she had never been the reason I ran. She had simply been the person who made it impossible to keep pretending I was fine. One evening, as the sky folded into a soft orange haze, I saw her again near the riverside walkway. She was standing alone, holding a small paper cup, watching the water move as if it carried answers she was not ready to speak out loud. My instinct was still to step back, to disappear into the crowd, to become invisible again. But something stronger than fear kept my feet planted. This time, I did not approach her immediately. I simply stood at a distance and observed the version of her that existed without me. And that realization hit harder than I expected. She was not waiting for me. She was living. Breathing. Becoming someone whole even in my absence. That truth was both painful and strangely freeing. Eventually, she noticed me. Not with surprise, but with a calm recognition, as if a part of her had already sensed I would eventually stop running long enough to be seen again. She did not smile, but she also did not turn away. That alone felt like progress. That I walked closer, slower this time, not like someone chasing a moment but like someone learning how to belong inside it. The space between us felt different now. Less like a wall. More like a question neither of us was rushing to answer. She finally spoke in a voice that carried both distance and memory. She did not ask why I left again. She did not demand explanations or apologies. Instead, she asked something simpler, something far more difficult to answer honestly. She asked if I had stayed anywhere long enough yet to know who I was when I did not run. That question stayed with me longer than silence ever could. For the first time, I did not answer quickly. I did not fill the space with excuses or carefully constructed words. I let the truth form slowly, even if it made me uncomfortable. I told her that I had spent years moving without direction, surviving without grounding, existing without presence. And now, I was trying to learn what it meant to remain in one place without disappearing emotionally. Her eyes softened slightly, not because everything was forgiven, but because something real had finally been said. She told me she did not hate me. That was never the problem. The problem was always the absence of certainty, the emotional instability of never knowing which version of me would stay long enough to matter, and that was when I understood something important. Love was never just about feelings. It was about reliability. About presence. About choosing to stay even when discomfort made leaving easier. The river beside us kept moving, steady and indifferent, as if reminding us that time does not stop for unresolved emotions. And in that moment, I felt something shift inside me again, but this time it was not fear. It was accountability. That I told her, not dramatically but honestly, that I was not asking for her to wait for me. I was not asking for another chance I had not earned yet. I was only asking for the space to become someone who did not repeat the same cycle again. Someone who could stay without needing escape as an option. Meherin did not respond immediately. She looked at the river, then at me, as if measuring not my words but the sincerity behind them. And then she did something I did not expect. She did not forgive me. She did not reject me either. She simply nodded, as if acknowledging that truth, even when imperfect, still deserves recognition. That night did not fix everything. It did not rewrite the past or erase the damage. But it marked something more important. A beginning that was not built on promises, but on awareness. In the following weeks, we did not rush into anything. There were no dramatic reunions or sudden declarations of love. Instead, there were small moments of honesty. Conversations that did not try to impress, only to understand. Silence that no longer felt like distance, but like calm presence. That I began to notice how healing does not announce itself. It does not arrive like a storm or a miracle. It arrives quietly, in the form of better choices repeated consistently. Choosing not to disappear. Choosing to stay present in discomfort. Choosing accountability over escape. One afternoon, while helping repair an old clock in the shop, I realized something simple but life-changing. Every broken gear did not need to be replaced entirely. Some just needed realignment. Patience. Care. Time. And I wondered if people were not so different. Later that week, Meherin and I met again at the same bookstore where everything had first reopened between us. The place had not changed much, but we had. There was no pressure in our meeting, no expectation of what it should become. Only two people standing in the same moment, no longer defined by who ran and who stayed. She told me she was not sure what the future would look like. And for the first time, I did not feel afraid of uncertainty. I had spent too long trying to control outcomes by running from them. Now I understood that uncertainty was not something to escape, but something to live through honestly. As we stood there, I felt a quiet truth settle inside me. I was no longer trying to be someone who never made mistakes. I was trying to be someone who did not repeat them without learning. Before this story reaches its final close, I want to gently ask you to engage with this video if it has touched your heart in any way. Your support means more than words can fully express, and it helps bring more emotional, meaningful stories like this to life. And now, just before the ending, I have a special request for you. Please comment below what this story made you feel, because sometimes shared emotions become the first step toward understanding ourselves better. As the evening light faded outside the bookstore, I finally understood the meaning of her question from that first day. She was never just asking if I was running again. She was asking whether I had finally learned how to stay. And this time, my answer was not a promise spoken in fear of losing her. It was a truth I was finally learning to live. For the first time in my life, I was not escaping love. I was learning how to remain within it.